Well, a warm welcome to today's talk. We're actually in a tropical situation at the moment, and it really is quite incredible just how adaptable human physiology is to varying climates. Now, of course, human beings are essentially tropical. If you take away our clothes and all our support systems, then the tropics is the only place we can survive. We adapt to northern and southern latitudes where it's much colder, partly as a result of technology, but also as a result of some generational change. For example, we think of the Fijians that Charles Darwin came across on his voyages in the Beagle, way down in Tierra del Fuego, I believe it's called, right down on the tip of South America. And they did seem to cope really quite well with the cold environmental conditions where Captain Fitzroy and Charles Darwin were absolutely chittered. And we also think about people that can live in high altitudes. There's adaptations to hemoglobin, for example, that means that the oxygen is attracted into the red cells at lower partial pressures of oxygen. So people can adapt over generations, but within a single generation, or just within one lifetime, a fair degree of adaptability is possible. So when we come into a tropical environment, we can tropically acclimatise to a certain extent within 10 days to a couple of weeks. Of course, as you get older, it starts to take a bit longer. Everything takes a bit longer when you're older, of course, as you'll know if you're approaching my age. But we can adapt. So when we're too hot, we're going to vasodilate and we're going to sweat. Sweating is actually the key factor in homeostasis of temperature. It is the main factor. It's sweating. If we can sweat, the latent heat of vaporization is extracted from the surface of the body, and that's what cools the body down. But of course, very often in the tropics, we have high humidity with high temperatures. And that means it's harder for the sweat to evaporate. That means the latent heat of vaporization is not taken out of the surface of the body as effectively. And that means it's harder to cool down. And as a result of that, hyperthermia is possible. Now, I think it's important to differentiate between hyperthermia, high body temperature, and fever or pyrexia. So in both cases, the body temperature will rise, but what is the difference between the two? Well, in hyperthermia, the body is trying to cool you down. So the set point in the hypothalamus will be at 37 degrees centigrade, 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's trying to cool you down, but it's failing to do so because the sweat's not evaporating, or you haven't got enough fluid to generate the sweat, or there's more heat coming in from the sun and the environment than you're able to get rid of. But with the fever, it's completely different. And this is the key thing that many people seem completely incapable of grasping. Even numerous clever doctors I've worked with don't quite get this. That when you've got a fever, your body releases pyrogens, heat-generating molecules. These are cytokines, intercellular communication. These cytokines go to your brain, they go to your hypothalamus, and they increase the set point. They actually make you want to be hotter. That's why even if your body temperature is normal, you feel cold. And it increases the body temperature. So we need to differentiate between the hyperthermia, which is an unfortunate thing and should be rectified as soon as possible, life-threatening, of course. Tragically, people do die of hyperthermia on a fairly regular basis. In the military situations, for example, when people are tabbing in full kit, it's quite easy to become hyperthermic, and of course, because there's bravado in that situation, they tend to think, oh, I'll just hack my way through it, but you can't breach physiological limits. I mean, I'm thinking of the recent health campaigner and author, broadcaster, Dr. Michael Mosley. I think he was just in the Mediterranean somewhere, and he was out walking. He's very fit, perhaps pushed himself a bit too far and didn't make it back to base. He was out in the sun, he got hyperthermia, and you just can't override physiological limitations. It simply can't be done. As human beings, we have to respect our physiology. Now, of course, Dr. Mosley, of all people, knew this well. So hard to work out what he was thinking. I suspect he did an early series on self-experimenters when he looked at people that self-experimented on themselves, like John Hunter, who infected himself with infected pus from a lady that he made his acquaintance with, and he infected himself with this pus locally, and he developed the signs of gonorrhea and syphilis. And in Dr. Hunter's mind, he thought that was the same disease, and that misconception carried on for some time. But it made sense because gonorrhea developed quickly and then syphilis developed afterwards. They're actually two separate diseases. But the point is, Dr. Hunter experimented on himself. It's a noble thing to do. And he took other cases. He talked about the case of Barry Marshall in Australia, who of course infected himself with Helicobacter. So maybe Dr. Moseley was thinking, well, I'll push myself a bit and see what happens in the noble tradition of self-experimentation. But whatever happened, it's a complete tragedy, and of course we extend our heartfelt condolences to all his family and friends and loved ones. But it just shows the real risk of high body temperature. Now, in England, of course, we come across hypothermia very commonly. Most commonly in the A&E situation, we see this after what's called a long lie. This is one of those strange A&E diagnoses. A long lie is where someone will injure themselves perhaps in the evening, and then they'll just lie there in a cold house all night and become hypothermic. It might be the next day or even the day after when someone discovers that they're there, and by that time they're hypothermic. The other time we see hypothermia is after someone's imbibed a fair amount of alcohol, or even not a fair amount of alcohol, but the alcohol, when you take alcohol, that vasodilates. It lets the warm blood go near the surface of the body, and people can become very cold very quickly and hypothermic as a result of that. It's quite a common cause of death in Russia, for example, where people have some vodka and just don't make it home because it's minus 20, but it also happens in the United Kingdom as well. Quite, again, tragic, preventable deaths. But for most of us, most of the time, the body can control our body temperature. Children under the age of 2 have difficulty controlling their body temperature. People with spinal injuries, again, have difficulty controlling their body temperature, as do people with certain cerebral palsies and things where the neurology, the complex neurology that controls thermoregulation, isn't able to operationalize the temperature that the hypothalamus would like us to be at. But when you have a fever, your body temperature is deliberately increased. And that's because at pyrexial temperatures, that increases the efficiency of the immune system. It also makes the environment very uncomfortable for viral replication and bacterial replication. So in adults, if you've got a fever of 38 or 39, maybe even higher, that's actually improving the efficiency of the immune system, and it's helping you to get rid of the fever. The fever's helping you to get rid of the infection. You're getting rid of the infection more quickly, which is good. But that's just a few thoughts that came to mind, because at the moment my body temperature is probably about 37 degrees centigrade, even although I'm in a warm tropical situation. I feel warm, but that's okay. But it's quite incredible the way that the body homeostatically regulates so many things to allow human beings to exploit so many different environments. That's just a few random thoughts generated by today's warm weather. Thank you for watching.